Hey, it's Shelley, and welcome back to the She is Courageous podcast. Now, I want to talk about something that I know, I actually know so many people feel, and I saw it last year with so many clients. I had conversations, people saying, I'm doing things and I'm still not getting anywhere. It can often feel like you're doing all the things, you're showing up, you're being consistent, you're ticking the boxes, but underneath it, nothing feels like it's actually shifting. Now, this is probably more relatable for business owners, but this is life stuff too. We can feel like we're doing things in life and yet we're still not getting the results we want. We can feel like we're really busy, that we're in action, we're moving, but we're not feeling like we're getting progress. And it's so frustrating, because you're not standing still, but you're not landing anywhere that feels right. And that's when we start to question whether it's worth it, right? So we then start to tell ourselves it's us, we're not cut out for it, etc., etc., etc. Now, I'm not going to get into all of what you start telling yourself. I want to talk about 5 really common reasons this happens. 5 really simple reasons you might be moving, but actually not getting anywhere. Now, this is not to shame anyone. This is not to tell you to do more. It's, as always, to get you thinking, to hold the mirror up a little bit. Because when you start seeing the patterns for what they are, that's when you can start to choose something different. You can't do anything about anything you don't realise. What do I always say? Awareness is the first step of change. So I guess this is a real awareness episode. So let's get into these 5 reasons. And there's probably more, okay? But I've chosen what I believe are the 5 most common reasons you're moving but still not getting anywhere. So the first one is you're reacting, not choosing. Now, you might take an assumption of what I mean by that, and this is so common and it could go in so many different directions, and I'd love for you to reach out to me if this one really resonates. But I'm going to share a really simple example, a real conversation that I had with a client just before Christmas. This was about business, and she said to me, I'm doing what everyone else is doing. Why isn't it working? I just don't get it. And that was the moment. That was the light bulb, because as she said it, and I kind of looked at her with a bit of a cheeky smile, she realised that was the answer. It wasn't working because it wasn't her. She was following the pack. She was copying what she saw in the online space. And I don't mean copying as in plagiarising. She was doing what she thought she should do. But none of it was really rooted in her natural strengths or how she actually works best. And how often do we do this, right? How often do we think we should do what everyone else is doing? That's reacting rather than choosing. She did what looked right on paper but didn't feel right. And because she wasn't choosing from a place of alignment, she was reacting based on what she was seeing, trying to fit herself into strategies that didn't suit her. This happens to so many of us, and not just in business. We get stuck in a cycle of movement that isn't truly intentional. It's responsive and it's bloody draining. We chase what we think we're supposed to do instead of trusting ourselves to ask what actually works for me. That's when the needle starts to move, when you stop reacting and start choosing. So the first question to ask yourself is actually, what works for you? Are you trying to do things that actually don't work for you? Because if you're doing them and they're not working, there is a lesson to be learned, but there might also be some really great skills or strengths you already have. What actually works for you? So, reason 2. So the second reason I think you could be moving, not making progress, is because you're actually chasing external validation. This one can be so subtle, but my God, it can be a blocker. You can be doing great things, right? You can be showing up, you can be taking the action, you can be launching stuff, but actually, if it's all tied to what other people think, if it's more about how it lands, how it looks, how many, let's talk about social media. If you show up to see how many likes you get, that works for a while. It gives you the little dopamine hit, but it doesn't last, because external validation will keep you moving, but it won't actually keep you fulfilled. And again, might not be actually taking you to where you want to get to. If you're constantly chasing approval, you will burn yourself out trying to please everyone else but yourself. So you've got to ask yourself, are the things I'm doing for me or for everyone else to see? Third reason that you may be moving and not making progress is that you are likely, or could be, let me be clearer, You could be mistaking activity for alignment. What do I mean about that? This is such an easy trap to fall into. You could have like a full calendar. You could be so productively ticking off the to-do list every single day. You could be showing up online. You can be doing all the things. But if you're honest, does it sometimes feel a bit hollow? Because if it's not aligned with what you actually want, that's misalignment. This is one of those classic moments where, and a bit like talking about, are we doing what other people are doing? Sometimes we can start to tell ourselves that we want to do all these things, or we need to do all these things because it will get us to where we want to get to. But actually, when we really think about what we want, this is a moment of truly understanding, where are you trying to get to? What does success really look like for you? Because that misalignment, that disconnect will create a feeling of being stuck, even when you're busy. And actually what it will also potentially create is a real feeling of resentment, because actually you're busy, you're doing so much stuff, but if it doesn't feel in alignment, if all the stuff you're doing isn't in alignment with who you are, where you want to get to, how you behave, you can be more stuck and more frustrated. But it can have you feeling, because you can convince yourself that activity is momentum. But actually, if there's no motivation for the activity, if you've got a long to-do list, but actually you struggle to actually do, then there's disalignment. Just because you're doing a lot doesn't actually mean it's moving you closer to what matters. And this is about really sense checking what you are doing and knowing where you're trying to get to. Do you know what success looks like for you? And are the things that you are doing truly moving you closer to that? Now, the fourth reason, and there's a lot of crossover in these, okay? But the fourth reason I believe that people are in movement, not making progress, is because they're actually staying in the familiar. Now, what I mean by that is even chaos can feel comfortable when we're used to it. So it's a bit like talking about, you can be busy. You can be overworking, overthinking, overgiving, but then telling yourself it's just who you are. That's normal. That's how you do things. You're always juggling a million things. But sometimes what we're doing is clinging to patterns that don't serve us just because they're familiar. This is what we do, right? We create beliefs about ourselves. We've always been that way. We've always been a multitasker. We've always worked under pressure. And we stay in the familiar because we tell ourselves that's what we've always done. That's just who we are. Even frustration can feel safer than realigning or trying to shift how we behave. Because actually realigning, trying to shift how we behave asks something from us. It asks us to trust ourselves. But staying in what you've outgrown or staying in something that's not working for you, even though it feels familiar, that's not safe. That's staying small. And actually, that becomes self-fulfilling. So just really notice, are you staying in the familiar? Even though, and this is a great moment at the beginning of the year to think about, even though it's not aligned to who you are and where you're going, who you're becoming. So many of us spend so much time holding on to old identities, old ways of being, telling ourselves it's just the way I've always been. Well, what if it's not the way you are anymore? Just because you used to be that way doesn't mean you are now. Now, the fifth reason I see so often that people are moving but not making progress is because they're actually afraid to pause. This is the She is Courageous podcast, right? I'm going to talk about courage. Sometimes courage isn't about taking another step, which might stand in direct conflict to what I talk about all the time. I often talk about courage is take the step. But you know what? Sometimes courage is really personal. And it might be about taking the step. Sometimes courage is really personal. It's doing what you need to do that might feel a little uncomfortable. And sometimes that might be stopping. It might be asking the really, really uncomfortable, scary question, why am I doing this? What do I get out of it? So many of us are afraid to pause. We're worried that if we stop, we'll lose out, that we'll stop moving and we'll go backwards. But also, because actually if we give ourselves the pause, it creates time to think. And if we think, the doubt might get louder. But what if we think and actually the clarity gets clearer? In the stillness, in the quiet, questions bubble up, okay? In the quiet, thoughts are allowed to speak out. And that can mean that suddenly we're face to face with the truth we've been avoiding. So it's easier to keep going, keep doing, keep spinning, keep moving, stay in motion. Because stopping might mean we have to get honest and change something. And none of us really like change. Back to staying in the familiar. But if your movement, if your action, if your activity is being driven by fear or habit or pressure, firstly, it's not going to take you anywhere new. And it might not be taking you to the right place. And it's just going to wear you out. So where do you go with this? Now, this is really top line. Maybe you've seen something of yourself in one of those reasons. Maybe even some more than one. Maybe one or two of them. But if you've seen anything, if anything in those just got you going, God, I think that sounds like me. Let that be your moment to take a pause. Let that be my invitation to you to ask, if no one else could see what I'm doing, would I still be doing it? Am I actually moving towards what I want? Or am I moving away from discomfort? Do I know why I'm doing this? Am I hiding in the busy? What would shift if I trusted myself? If I could do anything differently, what would it be? Because I say this all the time, most of us know what we need to do differently. But we run away from that because it's change and it's uncertain and it's scary and we might not get it right. This doesn't have to be about speeding up. Okay, that actually, this is a great time of year to be really moving with intention, to truly be moving with self-trust. I do not subscribe to you need to do more. I 100% subscribe to do less more intentionally. So if you feel like you're doing all the things, if you feel like you're constantly moving, but you're not getting anywhere, maybe one of those reasons resonates. Maybe it's got you realizing something else. If so, drop me a message. Let me know. I would love to know what else has come up for you. If you know someone who's stuck in the same spin cycle, busy, 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 not making progress, share this episode with them and give them a moment. Give them 15 minutes of moment to just think about, where am I going? What am I doing? And is it helping me get there? Stop reacting, start choosing, because that's where everything starts to change. Now, if you were nodding along today, listening to this episode, thinking, yeah, I'm definitely stuck in one of those patterns, first of all, you're probably not imagining it. And I'm very conscious when we listen to these things, we go, oh my God, that's me. Oh my God, that's me. But actually, you are probably playing out a well-worn role. You know, I talk about this all the time, these labels we put upon ourselves, but also what we've learned and how our behaviours are formed over time, and we just build and build and build upon them. And recently I created something called the Self-Leadership Style Quiz. Because what I've seen over and over again in my work is that these 5 reasons, they're not actually random, they're patterns. And they come up because we've learned over time to be a certain way. And we've developed almost personalities, identities based on being certain ways. Now we can shift and change some of this. Some of this, some people believe is completely hardwired. Now, back in my corporate world, I was fortunate enough to work with numerous psychological profiling tools, and I learned so much about how I behave, how I respond, and understanding that helped me learn how to navigate, how to leverage my strengths and to navigate my opportunities. Now, the self-leadership style quiz comes from that knowledge and what I've seen over the last 5 years of running my own business. Those patterns, I've given them names. There's the achiever, always chasing the next goal, constantly moving but never quite landing. The thinker, who, as the title suggests, endlessly analysing, gets stuck in their own head, waiting to get things right. The juggler, spinning all the plates, doing everything for everyone except themselves. The dreamer, full of ideas and potential but struggling to turn things into action. The supporter, the steady one, always showing up for others but often scared to put themselves first. And the performer, great at being visible, brilliant at the front facing stuff, but usually so that everyone else sees it, but doubting behind the scenes and not really sure if it's for them. The self-leadership style quiz is not about putting anyone in a box. It's about helping you understand how you can lead yourself out of the things that are holding you back and leverage within what's a real strength. Because once you see the patterns, you can either start to leverage them or change them. So if you're curious, go take the quiz. It'll just take you 4 or 5 minutes. You'll get an instant insight into your type, your habits. Yes, there's a label, but it's just to help you understand your type and your habits and where to focus next. The link is in the show notes. And I will see you next week on the She is Courageous podcast.